Hi, I'm Tyra G, your host of Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. Welcome once again to your virtual global gathering of phenomenal women and those who love them. I'm talking about you, mothers, daughters, grand and great-grandmothers who are fearsome and generous, humble and honest in pursuit of new possibilities and purpose. We've been having so much fun. For you first-timers, every week we meet at this table for 1 hour to experience, encourage, and empower each other. We share some aha moments, and we share stories that have been left in our pockets for too long. Every week we'll start right where we are. Although many of your voices will speak light into darkness, there is no insignificant person around this table. Each month we explore a new theme inspired by you. Yes, that's what I said, inspired by you. Each week we look at our monthly theme through a different lens to include socially, culturally, generationally. We will bravely walk into places where tradition has taught us that there are some things we just don't talk about, but not at this table. And no matter how hard judgment knocks, it cannot come in. Beloved ladies, here we live beyond the wreckage. As our community grows across cultures and generations from time to time, we're going to need to reflect on and discover who we're becoming, what our voices sound like, what we do, our circumstances, our what and our why. This month's theme is This Is Us. This month we begin to discover who is seated around the table. We're not only going to hear your story, but look behind your words, because after all, that's where our lives speak and our behavior. Frankly Speaking with Tyra G is a safe place for all women, no matter who or where you are, to take emotional risk in conversations and testimonials. It will lead you to restoration, renewal, resilience, and joy. And at any time, email me, tyra@tyragarlington.com, with your ideas, your comments, and your questions. I care about what you're thinking. I care about what you're feeling about the show. Honestly, I can't do this without you. Again, my email is tyra@tyragarlington.com. You're listening to Radio Fairfax, Fairfax, Virginia, on your TV, computer, or mobile device. And we are webcast worldwide on the internet at www.radiofairfax.org. I cannot brag enough about our theme song, which was composed and is being performed by Mr. Courtney Nero, my favorite saxophone player and my friend. Courtney surprised me with the theme song when he found my dream developing Frankly Speaking with Tyra G, so he named the song I'm Listening. Awesome sauce, Courtney. Thank you so much. After a short break, we're going to walk into the centerpiece of our show. This is where phenomenal sisters, you, volunteer to join me in an interview to share courageously and authentically. So, put your feet up and relax. Prepare to meet a new friend, and prepare to leave more inspired than when you came. One of my favorite questions to ask is, what if? It's so pregnant with possibilities. So, what if you believe the greatest service you could offer is to be a light on the path? Your affirmation might say, today I am devoted to shining the light of compassionate support and service on those who may be in need. Talk show host, inspirational speaker, and author Ayanna Van Sant suggests in her book, Until Today, and I quote, "At night, the ocean can be a huge, dark place. When riding the seas, you can never know for sure if the water will be calm or turbulent. You never know if you will drift off course or run aground. That is why there are lighthouses. When ships lose their way, they are guided by the lighthouse. When there is trouble or danger at sea, you can seek refuge by the lighthouse. In the midst of the storm, the lighthouse will always guide the ship safely to shore. Best of all, there is always someone waiting at the lighthouse. You, be a lighthouse. Let your life be a shining symbol for others. Let everything you do be of service to someone. Stand tall in the knowledge of who you are. Stand proudly during the tough times. Be aware that who you are and what you must offer can be a beacon to someone, some lost soul. You, be a lighthouse keeper. Be on the lookout for lost souls. Be alert to those who may be in need and have nowhere to go or no way to get there. Be a lighthouse to a child. Guide a child. Protect a child. You don't have to say much. Just let the child know that you're there should the need arise. Be a lighthouse to an elder, someone who's traveled the sea of life but now needs a bit of warmth and comfort, perhaps a cup of tea or some interesting conversation. Be a lighthouse to a young man or young woman who's lost their footing or maybe losing their direction in life. Remember, no matter what condition a wind-blown sailor reaches the lighthouse in, the keeper is always welcome. The keeper always has something on hand or knows what to do to get you up sailing again. Our guest today, Miss Robyn McCoy, is a lighthouse keeper. She has stepped into her space of service in a mighty way. Robyn is the proud mother of 3 adult children, but the apple of her eye is her grandson, Caden. She's worked in corporate America, in county government management, and as a life skill coach. However, she became Reverend Robyn McCoy when she was ordained in 2006, and she has served since as the women's pastor at 3 Virginia churches. Reverend McCoy's journey has also taken her from wife to widow, and more importantly, it has transformed her into a true servant of the Most High God. If you ask her, she will tell you, my journey hasn't been and isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. Robyn is a committed lighthouse keeper, proclaiming the good news to the poor, binding up the brokenhearted, comforting all who mourn, and providing for those who grieve. It is her commitment to this community of souls that motivated her to found Widowed Expressions, a fraternity and sorority of those who have lost their spouses. We speak shorthand for Widowed Expressions, cares. They know and they understand. My dear Robyn, I welcome you today.
Thank you, Tyra. It's good to be here.
Oh, it means the world to me. I know we talked about a theme called the past, the present, and the promise. And I'm wondering if for your listeners, our listeners, if you'd unpack that a bit and tell me how you arrived at that as the founder. It's your vision.
So I've wondered what was the purpose for all that I had been through, and God required me to take a look back. And he walked me through the past, how I arrived at the place where I am, the journey that I'd been on, both as a wife, a mother, and a widow. And so that's how I got through the past. The present is I'm living in, as you described, between the no longer and the not yet. Yes. And I'm excited about that. I'm also nervous about that at the same time because it's brand new and uncharted territory. I had a plan. My husband and I were going to retire together. That's not God's plan. And so this new not yet is a place that I am discovering and rediscovering who God is and who I am in him. The promise is what he promised me. He said he'd never leave me, nor would he forsake me. And so I am learning to trust all over again as a single woman that the God that loves me will be with me wherever I go.
You know, as I listen to you, I think of a number of women who are singular as a result of loss to life, death, or never having that significant other. And what I heard you saying behind the words is that you're on a journey, and your journey's had seasons. And, you know, I'm always landing on what season I'm in, and we laugh about me being at the end of the toilet paper roll. But God has decided I'm not over yet, so we're here together. And I want to thank you for your vision And tell me how you came up with the name, the people, what they look like, what they feel like. Are they men, women, old, young?
So one of the things that happens initially when a person becomes widowed is their voice begins to get quiet.
Okay.
All of a sudden, there's no one to talk to. And the things that you want to talk about, there's no one to listen anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so the voice gets stiller and stiller and stiller. And it happens in both men and women.
Okay.
And as I met a group of women who were all widowed, we call ourselves Line Sisters.
Okay.
We were all widowed in 2015. And the thing that has kept us together is being able to talk to one another about whatever it is that's really going on, how we really feel about being widows. It's not pretty. It's not easy. There's anger, there's rage, there's sadness, there's all manner of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to talk to somebody who knows what you're talking about, who doesn't think, oh, you should be okay, you should be over it by now, you should be through this. Are you still crying every night? Those kinds of things. And so we look at opportunities to bring widows
Mm-hmm.
and widowers together so they simply have a place to say the name of their beloved.
Oh, that's
So
wonderful.
sometimes it's just that I need to be able to say Steve
Okay.
out loud. And people won't look at me and get uncomfortable because Steve's no longer here. Well, my widowed friends, they understand that sometimes calling the person's name is the act of tribute and love and memory.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't require sympathy. It's simply an expression of the love that you had. So it's everyone who has ever lost a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter how old you are. The youngest person we've talked to is 21. The oldest is 84.
Okay.
And everyone in between, every socioeconomic as well as demographic you can think of, we are all united in the fact that we have lost our spouses to death.
Let me ask you something, because I hear you saying we talk to and we are. Are you just local?
So we are currently, though the vision is that there are widows worldwide.
Yes.
If you look at the statistics, we are one of the fastest growing demographics in the world. And yet no one really talks to us. No one asks our opinion about world events.
Mm-hmm.
How are those things impacting our lives? No one really sees us. We become part of the untouchables, the invisibles.
Mm-hmm.
And so our job, our hope is that we will begin to build a coalition and a community of widows that begins maybe locally,
Mm-hmm.
that you can connect with locally, but
Mhm.
that's connected to much larger communities of people
Mm-hmm.
worldwide. Because to lose a spouse, it doesn't matter where you live, in what country or what continent,
Mm-hmm.
the loss and the pain is still the same.
And I'm thinking your vision is possible, if for no other reason, through technology.
Absolutely.
And even I'm thinking, people that speak different languages, you have the ability to translate.
Absolutely.
But I have a confession to make as I'm sitting here and asking you to be authentic. I need to be authentic with you because I knew you and Steve as a unit. I suffered at the news and being with you during that time immediately. And when you told me the first time, you said, "Oh, I'm going to be with the widows," something inside of me jumped. And it was kind of like all of a sudden, I was very protective of you because I did not know what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not want you to exacerbate your pain
Yeah.
by being in a community of people with pain. I did not understand. It's taken me a lot of conversations
Mm-hmm.
with you to
Mhm.
feel like I could trust you
Yeah.
with other people because you are my Robyn.
Yeah.
And I want only goodness for you.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I know that's really not my job, but that's my selfishness.
Yeah.
And so it was important for me to include you in this dream because I know there are women out there that don't project that part of their persona readily.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually the last attribute
Yeah.
if you ask someone, tell me about you, they're not going to start, well, you know what? I lost my husband 2 years ago, and I'm really walking as a child,
Right.
So I want to tell you that I was uncomfortable the first time you said that. I was going like, whoa, really? Yeah.
Well, I still struggle to check the box.
Okay.
I still wear my wedding ring because in my head and my heart, it's only been 2 years. I see myself as still married to Steve.
I know.
Steve's in heaven, so it's a long distance relationship.
That's putting it mildly, but it's virtual.
It is. It is. But the issue is, it's a label that none of us ever wanted.
Yes.
None of us ever would have volunteered, but all of us did. Every single solitary person who's been widowed took a vow.
Yes.
To have and to hold.
Till death.
From this day forward, rich or poor, sickness and health, until death do us part.
Mm-hmm.
And you become part of this sorority, part of this fraternity, when you've honored that vow. Mm-hmm. That's how you get the title of widow. But nobody wants to be in our sorority. Nobody wants to be in this fraternity. And it is an uncomfortable thing, but I am learning to embrace this season because God chose it for me. And if he chose it for me, there must be something in it. Now, I'm not really, he and I still having conversation about
what that is.
Why I had to be chosen for this. That was part of the challenge. But there's something in this that he wants me to do. And it has to do with destiny and purpose. And both of those things are in his control, not mine.
And what I have liked, what I have appreciated and honored is your willingness to let me in your dark places. When it's a bad night, a phone call, or just coming over. I have lost not a spouse, but I know there is no formula for grief. And I'm never going to say to you, child, hey, you've been doing that long enough now.
Right.
I'm not going to say that because I don't know how long it takes. Right. I'm still talking to my mom and my dad every day, and they've been gone decades and decades and decades. Yeah. So, yeah. What? I'm thinking another question as we're talking about nobody wants to do this. What about the children?
No one wants their children to go through this.
Yeah.
But I am the middle of 7.
Okay.
And my mother was widowed when she was in her early 40s.
Oh, wow.
And so there was a hush that came over the family when we learned that my father had passed. And her brothers and sisters, my mom comes from a very large family as well.
Okay.
Her siblings came to the house. Their goal was to be helpful. They meant well. And what they wanted to do was to help her raise us by having each of us go live with one of them. My mom, God rest her soul, became enraged. You are not taking my children anywhere. I will raise my own children. I don't need your help. And she set about doing exactly that. Mm-hmm. And so there were people in my life who came alongside of me and who loved on me and hugged on me. There were fathers who were the fathers of my friends who in ways adopted me as their daughter, so that I had good examples of healthy male role models. But it's very difficult, especially for widows with young children.
Yes, that's what I was wondering.
And the challenge is we don't necessarily know how the children don't necessarily have the language or communication necessary to be able to help them. One of the things I found probably within the first year, there are lots of tools that can help. There's a book called Tear Soup. And Tear Soup is about how 3 different people handle grief. There's a grandfather, there's a grandmother, and there's a child. And each of them manages their tears differently. Grandma makes a pot of tear soup, and she shares that soup with people who come and share her grief with her. Some people can only have a teaspoon. Some people can have a cup. Some people can sit with her and have a bowl.
I love that.
Grandfather works. All he does is work. That's how he gets through it. The young child talks to grandma, and that's how she learns to help him move through his grief. So there has to be deliberate attention paid to children.
Yes. Even
adult children, my children, are still wrestling and grappling with the loss of their father.
Mm-hmm.
And so listening to their hurts, their wounds, and then making sure that they know you're not in this alone.
Yes, absolutely.
There are people who love you, and encouraging them to get grief counseling was something that I needed to do because Steve's departure was sudden. It was unexpected.
Yes.
And the trauma and the shock of it took us all by surprise. And each of us needed to go through a very different grief process.
Yes.
And just like in Tear Soup, my son Dwayne worked. My son Jared needed to have me to be able to talk to. Taryn distanced herself for a while, and all of them have had to wrestle with how to deal with their own grief. For Caden, who was 3 when his grandpa died, we explained to Caden that Pop, that's what he called Steve, Pop is with Jesus. And so he would walk in the house and he would see the picture that we had of Steve and he would say, "Hi, Pop, say hi to Jesus." And he would go on about his merry way. As he's grown, he's now 5, he still asks the question, why did Jesus want Pop to be in heaven? And I don't really have an answer for him. And so children ask all of the right questions.
Yes, they do.
Especially when we're unprepared for it.
Yes, they do.
But there is grace in that he still feels the love.
Yes.
And connection to his grandfather.
Yes.
And it doesn't hurt each time he asks, why is Pop in heaven?
You know what I'm thinking about right away is our faith walk, and all that God wants us to do is to be as a child and ask those questions and receive the answers and go on our merry way.
Right.
Except that he's there. What I want to do is take a brief break.
Okay.
And I want us to talk about your vision for the future of the organization and maybe some anecdotes of when there's been a breakthrough or a cherished moment and how that came about.
Will do. Be delighted.
Right. Super. Hold on, please. Stay close. And here we are back at Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. My guest is also my friend, Ms. Robyn McCoy, and we're talking about the journey from wife to widow. And we use the theme or the title, the past, the present, and the promise. And I think we've been kind of dancing between the past and the present. And it occurred to me a question. I find people who deal with people who are grieving are generally uncomfortable. And I had occasion to speak with someone who was grieving. I just didn't know what to say. And I said to him, but you were there. And I told him sometimes silence is comforting.
Most times in our situation, silence is comforting. We make jokes at my widow friends and I make jokes about the Meanwells. These are the people who, God bless them, want to help us get through. They tell us things like, don't cry anymore. He wouldn't want you to grieve. He's in a better place. It was God's will. You'll be okay. You're strong. None of those things is helpful. And in our heads, there is this voice screaming, shut up. You're making it worse. And so what I would say to people who want to be of service is to simply be there with us. When we cry, hand us a tissue. That's most helpful. If you come in and we're having a moment, it's okay to be quiet. Honor the moment. Ask us why we're crying. It may be that we just had the best memory and it washed over us, and the tears came before we could stop them, or we're trying to figure out how to do something that our spouse would have known how to do, and we're so frustrated that we can't do it.
But or how about this? How about doing something and you know your spouse would go, Robyn, what?
Really, Robyn? Like, yes. And so being able to simply be in the moment. We don't need you to say anything. Mm-hmm. The words have already been spoken. God's already done what God's going to do.
Right.
And we have to live and learn to live in that. There is a huge hole in my life now.
Yes.
However, I have a really big God.
Yeah.
And in that hole, he is bringing comfort,
yes.
peace,
yes.
hope, protection, provision,
right,
purpose.
Right.
He's filling that hole that was left by my husband's departure with things that I would never have even asked for.
Because you didn't know.
I didn't know to ask.
Right.
Steve and I had a plan. We were going to work our plan. And so I'm learning to listen for what God is doing. And sometimes the words of others can be distracting.
Yes, yes, yes.
And we don't want you to be uncomfortable either. We don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Tell us. Don't say anything. Hold my hand. Hand me a tissue. Give me a glass of water. A fan, any of those things, all of those things would be helpful. But most of all, just being present.
I remember initially, because I have so many fun memories of Steve, he had a very comforting way of telling you, look, stupid, do it this way.
Yes.
And apparently I did a lot of, I could have done things a little differently, but he was so kind.
Yeah.
And he would say, Tyra, we both had Nissan cars, and so mine was new, and there was so much I had yet to learn, and I was doing something totally ridiculous, and he was so kind, and he came, he says, Ty. I said, yes, Steve. He said, the next time you want to do that, you can do it from over here and just do this, this, and this. Did you know that? And it's sort of like, instead of saying, you big silly, what are you doing? He made me feel like it's okay and I can do this, Steve. Thank you very much.
Yeah. My husband made lots of deposits into my life and the lives of our friends. And I had been single for 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I said to God, all right, if it's not done by the time I'm 50, I'm done. And then he sends this wonderful giant of a man.
Yes.
And it wasn't a perfect marriage, but it was a good marriage.
Yeah.
There was love. There was love. There was life. There was laughter. And his impact on my life is still being measured.
Yes, yes, and will be
resounding,
and will be.
But the other thing is, I love hearing about people's memories of Steve.
Yeah.
It's comforting. It's affirming. It is a blessing that he touched so many people, and so being able to laugh with people at the things that he said or the things that we did is a way for us to share our grief together, because I realize that as a widow, I am the person that feels most uniquely and specifically his loss. But my husband touched so many people. And so being able to hear, and so on his birthday, what I do is now I ask people, share your favorite memory of Steve, or share a favorite moment that you had with him. And I've gotten some pretty hilarious stories about some of the things the antics that Steve did. And it makes me smile, and it makes me laugh, and it gives me comfort and encouragement in what could be a very challenging day for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was thinking, and I didn't really know actually what I did, I think, when you asked me, because people don't know, Steve was a Tuskegee Airman, but he was also buried in Arlington National Cemetery, and it wasn't immediate.
Right.
And there was a period of time while you had to wait.
Yeah. And so, so we waited. Steve was cremated, and that was what he wanted. And he also told me he wanted to be buried at Arlington. He was clear that he was going to leave the planet before I was. And so I would, we had the ashes in the house. Steve passed in August, so from August until March of the following year, I would come in and go, honey, I'm home. And we would have these long conversations where I would get to say everything that I wanted to say.
Never interrupted?
I was never interrupted, but it was almost as if I could feel his presence. I remember the week that we were able to finally lay his remains to rest. It was the most glorious day. But I remember coming home that after the interment service and thinking, he's not here. And all of a sudden I missed him again, fresh, anew, in more ways. And that's what being a widow is. It's moments and moments and moments. It's days and weeks and months and years of, I miss this person in every way possible.
Have you encountered in your group or external to your group or read somewhere that resonated with you, someone that is further along in a journey and they were able to deposit something in you that was helpful?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, my friend Diane and I recently had dinner with Miss Mary. Miss Mary is a widow of 9 years.
Okay.
And so she's not my line sister. She's further along in the process than I am. And Miss Mary described some of the most challenging of circumstances that she lived through. And she looked at me and she said, you're wrestling with being a widow and you have to surrender to God's will. And I thought to myself, she's right. And no one else could have said that to me. Diane, I don't think, would have known to say that to me. But because Miss Mary had gone through the process and had wrestled with God about being a widow, the circumstances of her husband's death were very different than mine. And so she described having time to prepare to grieve. But I have found, so Tear Soup was one of the books. Miss Mary's comment was also helpful. But there are lots of other resources that I have been able to find, daily devotions. And one of the things that we speak is hoping to do, this gets to what we want to do in the promise, is we want to collect the stories, the love stories, the journey, how the widowed cope with being in this season of widowhood, and to collect those stories, to be able to bring people together and allow them in a live production to be able to read their stories of their love, their life, their hopes, and what life is like now, because there are some things that are very, very different that I hadn't anticipated. Like, I really don't have to tell anybody where I'm going. I really don't. I really don't.
So why are you texting me about where you're going?
I know. And it's, so there are freedoms that I have that I didn't, that I'm just now starting to appreciate.
Yes.
I would much rather have my husband trust me on that. But I am learning things on my own. Like, I learned how to, this will be a small thing for many people, but I learned how to set up the network in my home.
That was a big day.
Network. Oh my God. I that was like, there was nothing better. You could have given me an Academy Award and $1 million.
I think you did broadcast it to everybody.
It was the best. It was the best day ever, because that was something that Steve did. But I remember saying while I was going through the process, okay, honey, what do I need to do now? What do I need to do now? And he would, I would hear in my head, okay, so these are things that you should look for. Go get the book. And I'm like, I don't want to read the book. But I found myself getting the book out and walking through. And that was the difference. He would read the book. I would simply go, these parts look like they go together. Let's put them together and see what happens.
Well, that's a role reversal.
Yes, it is.
That's a definite role. Well, tell me this. You mentioned the promise. Okay. I want to make sure that we have enough time for you to emphasize how you perceive the promise.
Yeah, that God has said that I would never leave you nor forsake you. And I'm putting him to the test.
Okay.
And each day there is new hope, new life, new love, new opportunities for me. And the promise is about how to get to where God wants me to be.
Yes.
How to be the widow, how to be in this season. I feel like I've been chosen.
Okay.
Not everyone gets to do this. I would rather have not, but I believe that God is using the pain that I have felt at the loss of my spouse to be able to be at least a comfort and a warm place to fall for those who've suffered the same thing. If we don't, no one in the church, in the body of Christ, really pays attention to the orphan and the widow, though God says specifically
to do that,
care for the orphan and the widow. And so I asked God, how could we best do that? And he said, you can simply be the voice. You can be the way that widows and widowers can have a voice in not only their families, but in their communities. We have purpose. We need purpose.
Yes.
We need, and it's rediscovering, because life is very, very different now.
Yes.
And not knowing, what's coming next, but being prepared to give our very best. Most of us would give ourselves away in order to be able to help someone else who's walking in those first few days. If you listen to the conversations, I've talked with probably 20 or 30 women and men in the last 90 days, all of whom are widows. Each of them is looking for, where do I go? Who can I talk to? And in some cases, they do need to talk to a grief counselor.
Yes.
That would be an appropriate way.
Yes.
But in others, they simply need people to come by and sit. People who won't interrupt when they're crying. People who won't, tell them that it's going to be all right. It doesn't feel all right. People who know where they've been, who can say to them, you're all right. You are absolutely right. This hurts. You can cry all day. I'll cry with you. And being able to stay in that place without trying to take that person out of it, because that's part of the journey.
Yes.
And so we have to be able, especially as widows, we have to be able to give back what we've been given. And most of us have been given a gift in finding one another and being able to talk and to listen and to laugh and to cry and to hurt and to be able to call in the middle of the night and say, this is when it hurts the most.
At midnight.
Or at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
When we tell one another, this is what I did. I don't know whether it will work for you. Maybe you want to try it. This is what I asked my doctor about. Maybe you want to talk to your kids about this. These are things. There are lots of life-changing decisions that have to be made, and life turns on a dime in many cases. And being able to help with listening ears and a heart that understands is what most people need most.
I was listening to you, and I was, me, always thinking about the children. Are there any organizations, facilities? Is there anything that's being presented? I know I'm working on a children's project that will allow children to bring whatever is going on with them to the fore and be dealt with, whether it's bullying or grief or what have you, or domestic violence. Is there anything for children who have lost a parent?
There's a program called Grief Share, and Grief Share deals with grief from all different walks of life.
Is it like television?
No, so they are small groups. They are typically offered by congregations across the community. Or through counseling services. But Grief Share is a place where people can go. They have programs specifically for children. But they deal with grief from all of its different elements, whether you've lost a child, you've lost a parent, you've lost a spouse, you've lost a dog, whatever it is. They deal with grief from that perspective. Widowed Expressions recognizes that there's something specific about the loss of a spouse. The covenant
Okay, gotcha.
has been broken.
I understand.
And we want to make sure that we're being of service where we can be of service.
I understand.
But resources like Grief Share are certainly
A
things
place
that
for the children.
They're a place where children can go and get assistance.
Speaking of children, I ask every guest to write a letter to her younger self.
Yes.
And did you write to little Robyn?
I did.
Oh, would you like to share what you wrote to little Robyn?
I will. Thank you.
Okay. I'm ready. I listen.
Hello, little one. You remember you loved reading The Velveteen Rabbit and Winnie the Pooh. I remember. Here's one of your favorite parts of The Velveteen Rabbit. Real isn't how you're made, said the Skin Horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the Skin Horse, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Well, my darling, you have become a real woman. You are so loved and so loving. Being loved and loving changes you so much. And yes, it does, darling. It hurts, sometimes a little, and sometimes a lot. Like when Daddy died. That hurt. I know it hurt a lot. But the love lasts longer than the hurt. Love also fills you up so that you feel like you're going to burst with joy. You feel that joy. You felt it when your husband, who really, really loved you, hugged you. He too went to heaven like Daddy and Mother. You feel that joy of love when you talk to Dwayne or watch Jared play the drums or you speak to Taryn. But you especially feel it when you play with Caden. You know, the little boy. That little boy is your grandson. Caden loves you, Robyn, and he calls you Bubby. Not only are you loved, you love others. You have real, true friends that see and love the real you, and you love them back. Well, it's almost time for me to go. Remember what Christopher Robin said to Pooh. If ever there's a tomorrow when we're not together, there's something you must always remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. But the most important thing is, even if we're apart, I'm always here with you. You, my darling Robyn, have your father's heart, your mother's smile, and you are the best part of me. I love you, Robyn.
I want to go out and play with little Robyn. I like her so much.
I do too.
And she had such a good life. Yes, she did. What we're going to do now is take a short break, and then we're going to close out our day.
All right.
This is Radio Fairfax, free-form programming, created by the people for the people of Fairfax County, Virginia. Call us or email us, 703-560-TALK, or radiofairfax@fcac.org.
Gaining weight was easy. All I had to do was sit down and eat. Losing weight, well, that's a lot harder. I have to work at it every day. But with every step, I lower my risk for type 2 diabetes and heart disease. And that makes every step, every choice, every day,
Morning, Daddy!
very much worth the effort. Morning, sweetie. I'll be done soon.
Learn how you can help stop diabetes by losing weight, eating healthy, and staying active. Visit checkupamerica.org or call 1-800-DIABETES. A message from the American Diabetes Association.
Each week, I want to leave you a little something, a little encouragement just in case. I call it a spiritual doggy bag to get you over the moment of doubt, anger, frustration, loneliness, when you feel tired of being tired, or you begin to think, is this all there is? Well, when you are in this mood, I want you to remember, first, in the words of Mia Sparkle, one of my favorite bloggers, you are amazing just as you are. You're stronger than you know. You're more beautiful than you think, worthier than you believe, and more loved than you can ever imagine. And in my own words, you had no choice. Picture this. 200 million to 600 million strong swimmers fought to get to that egg to determine who would become you. You came here with a biological DNA that shouted survivor, possibilities, overcomer, winner. I'm every woman. Hear me roar. You came here with both a guarantee and a promise. You need to get comfortable with that truth. You need to embrace that version of yourself. And since repetition is the best teacher, you will hear this often. You need to know you were born with everything you need. There is nothing you are missing. There is no need to frantically become more, be more, do more, get more. You are whole and complete and were gifted every talent and insight you needed to thrive in this world at the moment you were born. Your only job is to accept this truth and then to allow it to unfold. Some gifts don't become apparent until later in life. Some insights only become clear once you have lived life experiences that will unlock such wisdom from within you. Trust in this and relax. The theme song, this version of our theme song, features Mr. Tony Walker on the piano. I want to leave you with some thoughts to put in that spiritual doggy bag. You're worthy. You are never alone. You are not your circumstances. You have all of what you need inside of you to thrive. Nothing that has happened to you will be wasted. You are loved. See you next week. Same time, same place. Your seat is guaranteed. Now, if you happen to have a competing priority, no worries. Catch up with us on our YouTube channel, Frankly Speaking, with Tyra G. I'm going to let Mr. Tony Walker take us home. Be well. Love you.